Okay. All right. Now. All right. Welcome, guys, to uh, to the Big Book Study tonight. My name is David G. I'm a recovered alcoholic and a drug addict. I'm going to start out with set aside prayer first. God, please set aside everything I think I know about myself, my unmanageability, my spiritual path, and you for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my unmanageability, my spiritual path, and especially you. And let's get this thing going here. So, in this intensive deep dive study, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, we read and emphasize the instructions, promises, prayers, questions, warnings, and other key information. We believe that we cannot get well unless A, we know what is wrong with us, B, what is the solution to that problem, and C, what is the action to get to the solution. Fortunately, the answers are in the book. There are no attendee comment portions in the study, but we will take questions, and Rob will be manning the chat. So he will, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, and Rob is usually very good about answering them for us. So please post them if you would. We again, we don't answer questions during the meeting, but we will. If you have any other questions you want, you can post them on the WhatsApp group that we have, and then or we can discuss them at future meetings. We are not the official Big Book experts or gurus, but we will share our experience and strength, knowledge of our study of the book, and the teachings of those who came before us. We don't have Abby here tonight, so I'm going to also do definitions if need be. And if you guys need a definition, you can always throw that in the chat of a word. And Rob is again, he's the man of all means. He will take care of it. So before I get going, there's something a little different tonight, as you may well see. David Galula, or Jedi David, is not here. He is on a business trip. And I am very, very happy to have a returning member of Alcoholics Anonymous be a part of this thing. And a good friend of mine, Kathy Eber, she's here to sit aside alongside of me. And we're going to have a lot of fun tonight. So welcome, Kathy, if you would.
Thanks, David. My name is Kathy. I am an alcoholic, an addict, control addict, all of the above. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be back.
Such a joy. I'm so happy. We had such a good time last time. I could not, the opportunity presented itself. I said, this is a must. So thank you. So guys, good news. We're starting a new chapter tonight. We're in chapter 10. So chapter 2, the employers. So I'm going to do if Kathy's okay with this, I'm going to do a little lead in about this to the employers. So the employers is so it was written by Hank Parkhurst, but it was rewritten. So let me say, Hank wrote the original draft to the employers, and then Bill wrote it because Bill believed that each chapter in our text should have the same writing style to make it easier for the reader. And just to be kind of honest with you, Hank was had a little rambled on a little bit, and Bill didn't necessarily like his writing. So Bill and Bill did another thing also out of respect to Hank. So Hank was an agnostic, and the thing about him being an agnostic, he didn't really want God in there. So God of your own understanding is kind of comes from Hank, I believe, in some shape or form that we have in our big book. And the thing about that is, out of respect to Hank, Bill doesn't even use the word God or spirituality in this whole chapter. So, so a little history about Hank, if you guys would like. Hank Parkhurst was married to Kathleen, his wife, and Hank was 57 years old at his death. So Hank got sober. He was like the second member in New York to get sober. Bill Wilson was his sponsor, and Hank drank after 4 years of sobriety. And so when he ended up in the hospital, they don't know exactly, and I couldn't find anything even in writing of the big books, and maybe because I didn't look hard enough. But there's been two different reasons why he died, but they're both related to addiction. Either died directly from booze, or he died directly from pills. So one of the two, or maybe the combination. I don't know if anybody here, anyone else can relate to that, but we're all alive by the grace of God. So Bill was Hank's sponsor, and Hank was a great businessman. He worked for Standard Oil and was a sales manager. Had a lot of experience with with employees. I think he had worked, had 66. Later on, we'll find it. The second paragraph, we'll find that he has 6,600 men underneath him. So he was a very good businessman. Another thing about Hank, his story is in the first edition of the Big Book. His story is the unbeliever. He was considered to be, again, AA number 2 in New York and was Bill's sponsee. He's also considered to be the 5th member of Alcoholics Anonymous back in 1935. So, and where did Bill find him? Bill found him in September of 1935 at Towns Hospital. So, also another fact about Hank, we'll find him mentioned in the Big Book. Not only did he have his own chapter in the first edition, but he's also mentioned in the doctor's opinion on Roman numeral 29. So I believe that's enough information for me. If you want to know a little bit more about that, if you ever want to, and Howard and Kathy turned me on this. This is a book, Writing in the Big Book. So I don't know if you could see everything here by William Schaberg. I know that it took him a very long time, and he did a lot of research, and it took him a long time to write it too. So a lot of research and a lot of history is in here. So you can read about this, about Hank and to the whole chapter of the employers. I just went to page 398 and got 397, 398, and got a lot of information from that kind of stuff. So that's about enough of that, I believe. So anything else you want to add, Kathy? Or you want to kick this thing off with the chapter?
No, that was awesome. Let's kick it off.
Yeah.
All righty, page 136, Kathy, alcoholic addict. So if you've the study edition, it's 136, and I believe it's probably that in the fourth. Okay, so chapter 10 to the employers. Among many employers nowadays, we think of one member who has spent much of his life in the world of big business. He has hired and fired hundreds of men. He knows the alcoholic as the employer sees him. His present views ought to prove exceptionally useful to businessmen everywhere.
So that is that paragraph there is actually Hank's original draft. So that whole thing, and as you see in the next little semi-sentence there with the semicolons, is where Bill takes over. But so that paragraph is all Hank, and this is an interesting chapter. And I was probably about 10 years sober when someone told me to address this chapter a little bit differently, if I like. So if I want to change the title of this chapter to sponsors, just change that in your head and see how this relates to you and yours being sponsored, and also you being a sponsor, and see if this relates. We're talking about being armed with the facts about ourselves. Early in the chapter, no one, the employer has no understanding of the alcoholic and the illness and all the old ideas that they think that alcohol is just stop, do it on your own free will. You should be able to stop no matter what. And it's out of ignorance. But it wasn't really, because it was in the 1930s before Alcoholics Anonymous started. It was in 1920, so it really wasn't. But today we have the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a lot more literature that we can read about alcoholism today. But when I read this chapter, I read it as two sponsors, and see if that sits well with you. So check that out if you'd like.
Awesome. Thanks, David. I love that. And yeah, so I thought it was interesting to just read like the first paragraph of Hank's story, The Unbeliever, and I'm reading it out of Experience, Strength, and Hope, just to give you an idea why it was heavily edited and changed by Bill, because he has a kind of a tendency to write in I don't know what you would call it, dot way. So it says, The Unbeliever, dull, limitless, semi-comatose. I lay on my bed in an infamous hospital for alcoholics. Death or worse had been my sentence. What was the difference? What difference did anything make? Why think of these things which were gone? Why worry about the results of my drunken escapades? What the hell were the odds if my wife had discovered the mistress situation? Two swell boys, sure, but what difference would a corpse or an asylum imprisoned father make to them? Thoughts start whirling in my head. That's the worst of this sobering up process. The old think tank is geared in high. What do I mean? Hi. Where did that come from? Oh, yes, that first Cadillac I had. It had 4 speeds, had a high gear, insane asylum. How that bus could scamper. Yes, even then, liquor probably poisoned me. What had the little doctor said this morning? Thoughts, hesitate a moment. Stop, you're mad, turning. What was I thinking about? Oh, yes, the doctor. So we needed him to write this chapter. I don't know where that was going. That sounds like a mumble of thoughts that I would have in my bed. And um, you know, with what you're saying as well, David, how he had yes, how he didn't stay sober. And this is probably, well, there's two reasons, not really clear, but I was told that the two reasons were is probably because he was having affairs, one with Ruth Hawk. And also, like, if we go back to the sex part in our book, it tells us that if we continue to hurt people and we don't live up to our sane and sound ideal, that we will drink. And I think, by reading that as well, it talks about the mistress situation. But this is Hank being introduced. So that's all I really have for that. And
Uh,
yeah, like you said, he was the individual at the end of the doctor's opinion who was the one with the case of pathological mental deterioration.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well done. I love that you read that out of The Unbeliever because it is such a rambling. I mean, was there a period anywhere to be found or a comma? It's like, oh my God, you know, yeah, very hard to understand and read. So that's why, Bill took that over supposedly, and why not? You know, yeah, and even think about that is the spiritual experience that we need to have is am I going to do God's will? Is it having an affair, stepping out on my wife, having wanted to have an affair with Ruth Hawk, my secretary, and I don't know that he ever really did or not, but I know that he wanted to for sure. Because Hank was a big guy, like a really tall, good-looking, redheaded, broad guy, athlete, kind of like that. Thought very highly of himself. Ego? Anyone? Anyone else see ego here? It's like ego has to be smashed. And Hank, I don't think ever was able to smash his ego. So when he stepped out on his marriage or wanted to step on in his marriage, of course, drink is the solution then, right? That's all I got there, Kathy.
Absolutely. Will I read that sentence because it is a paragraph and the next paragraph together, or you want to pause at the
Yeah.
sentence?
No, I have nothing with that semicolon. This was where Bill's kicking it off. That's all.
Perfect. But let him tell you, I was at one time assistant manager of a corporation department employing 6,600 men, 6600. One day my secretary came in saying that Mr. B insisted on speaking with me. I told her to say that I was not interested. I had warned him several times that he had but one chance. Not long afterward, he had called me from Hartford on 2 successive days, so drunk he could hardly speak. I told him he was through, finally and forever.
So yeah, we already mentioned Ruth Hawk, so we know that that's the secretary there, and we in that paragraph, as Kathy read, he's warned the employee. Think about this if this is a sponsee. And this is something that you work with. You're not armed with the facts of yourself. Maybe you've never done a fourth step. Maybe you've never finished all your amends. Maybe you haven't turned your defects of character over to a power grading yourself in 7. Maybe you're not living the disciplines 10, 11, and 12, and you're trying to work with others. And I see this happen a lot of times in the rooms of AA and CA, in my experience over the years. And they're not armed with the facts about themselves, and they take somebody on because someone said, would you be my sponsor because you say some wonderful things in a meeting. Saying wonderful things in a meeting and living that way are way two different things. A lot of fun sayings like just don't drink and go to meetings, or just don't drink between meetings, and all this silly stuff that people come up with, and they take it out of context, out of something that's really has some plausibility in the big book of books on anonymous, and they flip it around. And I've done this myself, right? Early on in sobriety. But if I'm a sponsor and I'm not armed with the facts about myself, am I doing anyone any justice? Because this is a life or death situation here. And Hank's got a lot of experience being an employer. And again, I'm reading this chapter as though I'm the sponsor. And that's just my choice that I want to do it because I want to be able to relate to this thing. But I've seen people die because I hear people say, Well, just go to meetings and then call me every day. No mention of the big book. No mention of opening up the forwards to the first edition, the second, third, fourth edition. No reading the doctor's opinion. You know, I have a format that I use with my guys, and I take them through there. So and Howard just got done doing this on the spiritual cartel, the window of opportunity. What does the window of opportunity look like? Well, I don't know how quickly that window shuts. So my job as a recovered alcoholic, and I don't use that term loosely. I am actually a recovered alcoholic of sound mind and body today. I take these people through the work quickly and rapidly, and then I take them back through the work again. And then when I get done with the work out of the big book, I take them through the traditions. And I have a traditions workshop at my house once a month on Saturday, and I have all my sponsees and grand sponsees and a whole bunch of people come over, and we listen to a guy named Billy N out of Florida. And that's just what I do because I'm not versed enough in the traditions to do a leadership role, but he is. So, but back to my point. And how many times do I see people take people through the work, and then the guy goes back out and relapses because he has no program of action. He's not even told to pray. He's just told to go to meetings and just don't drink no matter what, and call me if you feel like taking a drink. And then that sponsor tells him, you know what, um, you're fired. Like, I don't even understand that language, fired. I don't even get that. Like, why would you fire someone? The only reason I would fire someone is because I'm inadequate with carrying the message. That would be the only time I feel that. And I'm not saying that's for you guys, just for me. I've never fired anyone in my 25 plus years. And I sponsored hundreds of people, and I still sponsored way into double digits today. But but I will say because the reason why I don't fire anyone is because I understand the first step. I understand the powerlessness in step one. I understand the unmanageability, you know, and so I'm not giving up on anyone. But I think Chris Raymer says this, so I'm going to steal from him. That the problem in Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous a lot of times is his poor sponsorship. That's all I got.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. That was brilliant. Absolutely. It is inevitable, be it the real alcoholic, that if I don't come in here and work these steps like the desperation of a drowning man, and if I'm not taking people through this work with the desperation of a drowning man, armed with the facts about myself, inevitably they're going to drink, or I'm going to drink if I don't do the work. It's inevitable. Like, so it makes sense when someone says, I relapsed, because my first step tells me that. Yeah, in this paragraph, this again is Bill heavily edited, Hank's experience, and it's in the company Standard Oil. And I just wanted to speak about this part where it says, I had warned him several times that he had one more chance. And we see that Mr. B cannot stop himself from starting because of the mental obsession. He goes back and he goes back and he goes back because he's had several times that he's been warned. And it said, not long afterward, he called me from Hartford on 2 successive days. So drunk he could hardly speak. I told him he was through finally and forever. And like Hank had warned him, and he had give him more than one chance before he let him go. He'd give him several chances, and it still wasn't enough because of the mental obsession that we have with this illness. And I forgot to say also, you know, just to give Hank a shout out, was like, I'm sure we've heard it as well, like especially in history meetings and writing a big book. But like if there was no Hank, there'd be no book. You know, if Hank had stayed sober, we would have been Bill W and Hank P, not Bill and Bob, right? And I just wanted to give that a little mention,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and yeah, that's all I have on that. Will I continue to read on?
Yeah, and I was going to say that was great. I love that. That was perfect. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, of course. My secretary returned to say that it was not Mr. B on the phone, it was Mr. B's brother, and he wished to give me a message. I still expected a plea for clemency, but these words came through the receiver. I just wanted to tell you, Paul jumped from a hotel window in Hartford last Saturday. He left us a note saying you were the best boss he ever had and that you are not to blame in any way.
Yeah. So again, if I'm reading this to sponsors, I've seen this happen too in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous. I really have. This is the setup. Is he's been warned many times. He is, Kathy pointed out brilliantly here, he has the obsession, and in his mind, his voice sounds just like himself, and he believes the lie, and he drinks on the lie, and then he breaks out in craving. I mean, it's going to happen every single time for a real alcoholic like myself. And this guy did the same thing. And the outcome of this is his solution was suicide. That is not a solution. That is not a solution. Just like alcohol was my solution. So let's not say that it wasn't. Alcohol was my solution until one day it wasn't. But that's not a solution. It's not a sufficient enough substitute. I need to have a spiritual experience. And again, I'm not saying I can divert someone's death. I can divert their predetermined or their death early if I carry the message to them properly out of the big book. If they're willing to go to any lengths. Like, dude, it's not easy in the beginning. It never was easy in the beginning. But when I found out the truth about myself, that, as Kathy pointed out, that I have this obsession of the mind and I have this allergy of the body, it's in the big book. I mean, it's the 8 pages of the doctor's opinion up to page 23 talks about the body. That's 31 entire pages that's going to tell me all about that. And then pages 23 through 43 is going to talk about my mind. And then the real problem is, because the A problem is that I'm powerless over alcohol, cocaine, or all of my altering substances. But the real problem is my life is unmanageable. And I can find that on page 44, 45, and then a paragraph of 52. And again, you can find it on page 60, 61, 62. I mean, so there's 54 and a half pages minimum addressing, out of 172 pages, including the doctor's opinion, the first step. So do you think that's vital and important? Yeah, because we can save someone's life if they know the truth, if they can concede to their innermost self, as Bill says strongly on page 30 of our big book. Then maybe suicide is not an option. I think we can prevent those deaths sometimes, but sometimes we can't. And I've been to many, and I know you guys have too, and it's heartbreaking. It's just, and then the kids and it's such a selfish act, but when you have no other thought in your mind, and the thought is obsession to kill yourself because you can't stop drinking. I get it. Roland Hazard couldn't stop either. And working with Carl Jung, and I mean, having access to one of the greatest psychoanalysts in the whole wide world, and he still drank like a couple of days out of treatment. I stopped to get a sandwich in Germany or wherever the heck it was. I'm making the story up as I go. But I'm just saying, it's like, and he picked up a drink. It was just that simple, and the thing is, today is like, I don't want to take a drink today. That's by the grace of God, but there's something I have to do. So I don't want to commit suicide. And so I don't want to take a drink. I have to stay in fit spiritual condition, live in the disciplines of 10 and 11. Thanks.
Thanks, David. That's awesome. Yeah. And I just remarking on how, this is the first example of 3 examples we're going to get here that Paul, Mr. B, committed suicide. He made the ultimate sacrifice. And I think I'll wait to the 3rd example to do a wee question and share my own experience on that. But yeah, absolutely. It's do or die. Like, it's do or die when we get here. We got to get the solution, and it's spiritual. So that's all I have on that. Okay, so another time, as I opened a letter which lay on my desk, a newspaper clipping fell out. It was the obituary of one of the best salesmen I ever had. After 2 weeks of drinking, he had placed his toe on the trigger of a loaded shotgun. The barrel was in his mouth. I had discharged him for drinking 6 weeks before.
And I wonder how Hank felt, right? The same thing I wonder how I would have felt if I told that guy, I can't work with you any longer, because you're not willing to go to any lengths. I think I have to match their willingness. On page 97 of the big book, they're going to talk about all the things that I'm going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Let me just look it up. Hold on. Give me a second. Hold on. Sorry about that. Well, it says on page 97, never avoid these responsibilities. Be sure you are doing the right thing if you assume them. Helping others are the foundation stone of recovery. That's a 12th step. That's a 12th step. So I got to be inconvenienced. And Bill lists 12 inconveniences after that on page 97. And it's okay. I will find the time to do those kind of things. But the outcome of this is, and I've seen guys do this in recovery with it more time than me, that becomes their solution and they kill themselves. And I just one of my guys that, man, when I first got sober, he was so helpful to me. And I don't even know what his cause was, but he went out in the woods right after a meeting and blew his brains out. And the assumption was maybe a cancer, stage 4. I don't, no one knows, because he never had a sponsor. He was really good with the big book, but he had no one to be accountable to. And he didn't ever sponsor anyone else. And I don't know if those things all have something to do with that whole thing. I don't know what his relationship with God looked like either, but I love this guy. He was just a history buff, or had a memory like crazy. And the last thing I want to say about that is I had a guy call me from my past who I sponsored about 22 or 23 years ago, who just kind of went AWOL. I mean, and I watched him recover. I watched him get his kids back. I watched him get a career. I watched him get a house. I watched him do all these things. I didn't do these things for him. He did the work. By the grace of God, he was able to reassemble all those things in his life, and it was absolutely a miracle. And he was on fire. He was working with others. He was going to treatment centers with me. We were going shoulder to shoulder through this process. And then slowly, I believe he stopped calling me. But the first thing I think he stopped doing was praying. And then I think he stopped calling me. And then he stopped going to meetings, which was probably the last thing that most people end up doing. And he called me the other day, 23 years later, after he got sober, 23 years later. And I had already had information from guys that found him in a treatment center not too far from here. And he was in a wheelchair. He was about 60 pounds underweight. And he didn't look like himself from some of the guys I used to roll with back in the day. And I was elated that he called me. And he asked me one thing. He says, "Will you sponsor me?" And I immediately said, "Are you willing to go to any lengths?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, you don't know what that means." And I said, "But when we get together, I'm going to explain to you exactly what any lengths means out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous." So I'm excited. Like, my wife was like, "Dude, you're on fire right now." She's in the truck with me, you know? It's like, yeah, because he didn't die. And he knew that if he came back to Cocaine Anonymous, not because of me, but because someone who's armed with the facts about themselves could take them through this work, and he could recover again. Instead of taking a shotgun or jumping out of a window, he didn't do the supreme sacrifice, and he doesn't want to drink anymore. So now let's get busy and do this work. Good, Kathy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, David. And yeah, like, I love when you pointed out in page 97, and we probably will dance through the pages, guys. But it said, helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. And like, step 12, working with others, is my foundation. It's all 12 steps. You know, when I came in, people used to say, if you get steps 1, 2, and 3, that's your foundation. It's all 12 steps. I have to be working with others. That is the foundation of my recovery. Like David was reading about, and you know, if you're here tonight, like you were mentioning about your friend that called David, like, I thank God he got back. Thank God you're here, because if you're here and you're alive, you have a chance. You have a chance. So with this paragraph, this obituary, this guy, he also killed himself as well. And Hank had discharged this guy for his drinking. But we also know that he sorry, he killed himself. And it also shows that after 2 weeks of drinking. So we're talking here about, it shows that he has the physical allergy. And knowing Hank, he probably doesn't feel like firing people, because in the page before we talked about how he had warned him several times that he had but one more chance,
Mm.
and he gave this guy probably a few chances. And we can see that because of the mental obsession, the guy went back and went back and went back. So we're starting to see the physical allergy. We're starting to see the mental obsession here in these two examples. So that's all I got on that.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay. Still another experience. A woman's voice came faintly over long distance from Virginia. She wanted to know if her husband's company insurance was still in force. 4 days before he had hanged himself in his woodshed. I'd been obliged to discharge him for drinking, though he was brilliant, alert, and one of the best organizers I have ever known.
We have such great attributes, especially if we get sober. And later in the chapter, they talk about, two hardworking salesmen that work for Hank. They did the work of five people. And I believe that was like Bill Wilson and Jim Burwell. These guys were just really, and we are like, I own my own business, but I work really hard and I build it up to be where it's at today. Well, here's a third example of another suicide, right? And I'm not going to steal Kathy's thunder, and I don't think I would do it any justice because I know she's got something planned here. But in the next paragraph, watch what happens after this paragraph, and that's where I'm going to end at.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so this a guy killed himself, another experience of a guy, another example for us. He likely has the physical allergy and the mental obsession. But I ask myself with this paragraph, Kathy, the other 32 people here, Howard, have any of us ever had suicidal thoughts?
Mm.
Tried to take our own life, perhaps unsuccessfully, because we were hopeless and we couldn't stop drinking? And I know for me, I've had that experience that I wanted to take my own life. And really looking back, it was because I didn't have this solution. I was hopeless in my spiritual malady. I'm not just an alcoholic, I'm an addict. So whatever I couldn't get the help that I need, I had no solution. This was by trying outside help before 12 step. And I made that call because I had tried to overdose, because I lived in this hopeless state of mind and body because I did not have this solution. And I've also had those thoughts of, like it talks about in Bill's story, like a drink will solve that. I've had that negotiation of, well, you can either take your own life or you can have a drink or you can go and get what you want. Like that's what it comes down to. On my own self-reliance and my illness, that's the only solution I have,
Mhm.
and so that's what I got on that, David. Yeah. So here were three exceptional men lost to this world because I did not understand alcoholism as I do now. What irony. I became an alcoholic myself. But for the intervention of an understanding person, I might have followed in their footsteps. My downfall cost the business community unknown thousands of dollars, for it takes real money to train a man for an executive position. This kind of waste goes unabated. We think the business fabric is shot through with a situation which might be helped by better understanding all around. Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. There's a lot. That's a mouthful. That's a huge paragraph. So such here are three exceptional men, and he's being descriptive here and meaningful. I mean, these are exceptional men. We're not bad people. Stop that. Like I know that other people may view us that way when we're in our cups, as Bill says early in the book. But the thing is like lost to the road because I did not understand alcoholism. So back on page 17, Kathy said we're going to dance around the book. Yes, we are. We're going to dance around the book a little bit. So back on page 17, in the third paragraph, in the chapter There's a Solution, the last paragraph there, it says, or there's, I'm sorry, the sentence prior to it, the two sentences prior to it. The feeling of had shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us, which is the craving and the obsession and the unmanageability in our lives. But that in itself would never have held us together as we have joined. So, how many people are like? I went to I when I got sober at 9 months, I had to do some time, because of the crimes I had committed. And when I did some time, everyone was in there for the same reason I was. So we had one common peril, right? And most of us in there was because when we drank, we broke out in craving, and when we stopped, we couldn't stay stopped. So the obsession. I was having problems with personal relationships, full of fear, unhappy, usefulness, everything in the bedevilments, right? So the next paragraph, though, says the tremendous fact for every one of us is that we discovered a common solution, the steps of action in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the treasure map to the treasure. And we have a way out, which we can absolutely agree. Like everyone that does this work and does this honestly and thoroughly never has to take a drink and they have permanent sobriety. But I have to live in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. I don't suffer from alcoholism anymore. I know the truth. I know the problem and I know the solution and I know the practical program of action. And Kathy brought up the word hopeless. And when I go to treatment centers, me and Jedi David, we always pray for them that you are a hopeless variety. Because if you got one more plan, you're probably going to try to execute it on how to stay sober. And Bill gives a great description on page 8 in his story at the end of his drunkalog. He says it's in the first paragraph. It's on page 8. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair found in the bitter morass of self-pity. Oh my God. Does self-pity bring you back to drink? Yes, it does. Quicksand stretched all around in all directions. I don't know if anyone's old enough here to remember Tarzan movies in black and white when I was a kid, but they would fall, he would fall in quicksand. Yeah, Howard's right. And he would fall into quicksand, and then Cheetah would come and put a stick or a rope in there, or some kind of, and pull him out. But he could, every time you struggle, you go down deeper and deeper and deeper. That's what Bill's talking about here. He said, I had met my match, I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol is my master. This is the first step. This is the bottom here. And I always have to ask myself, where am I at with my first step experience? Every time I work with a new guy, where am I at? Because don't think that this obsession, the thought doesn't come into my mind. Maybe you've overthought this. You're sober 25 plus years. Maybe you didn't drink as bad as you thought you did. Maybe you didn't use as much. Maybe now that you're sober this long, you could probably control your drinking a little bit. That's a lie. That's the voice in my head that's telling me a lie, and it sounds just like me. And that is a passive thought, doesn't stay there very long. And I know what to do with that because I have a 10th step. I ask God it wants to remove it. I discuss it with someone immediately. I make amends if I harmed anyone quickly because I might be obsessed with myself at that time, and then I turn my thoughts to others. And that's what I do. Going through that whole paragraph now, back to 137 in the second paragraph, talks about what irony. I became an alcoholic myself. I was always the kid in my neighborhood who was always protecting everybody, even though I was a small little runt. I would just felt like I was 6 feet tall and bulletproof, and I was the oldest kid in the neighborhood. So I was always thought that, and everybody else had drinking problems because we all started drinking at very early ages. But I always could control my drink. I was a moderate drinker in the beginning, and I was always protective of them. Like, dude, you should stop drinking. You're getting really drunk, and you're going to get in trouble with your parents. But back to this thing, it says to the paragraph, but for the intervention of an understanding person. I was going to give you the definition of intervention, but then I kind of thought about who I'm talking to here. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what an intervention here is, so I'm not going to give you that. Understanding of a person. Who's that person? Think about this. This is Dr. Silkworth and Bill Wilson that came to him. Wow. But we have the same kind of people here that are armed with the facts about themselves. Sponsors who have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. And he says, I might have followed in their footsteps. My downfall cost the business community unknown thousands of dollars. So think about that, how selfish that was. And all the times that I blew off work and all the times that I lost jobs and how much money I cost someone to be retrained to take my position. And there was many times that happened. And then the last sentence on there says, this kind of waste goes on unabated. We think the business fabric is shot through with this situation, which might be helped by better understanding all around. This is Bill's second reference in the big book on page 63 in the third paragraph. Bill uses the word shot through. He uses it as permeated, right? And he's relating it to fear. And what does it look like when you get shot? It permeates you and it drives through and it spreads throughout your body. That's what fear does. Fear consumes me is what that does. And that Bill's descriptions are so like relevant and so realistic and full of color. It's like, he's such a purposeful writer. So we think the business family is shot through with this, which might be helped by better understanding all around. So if I'm a sponsor, I should be armed. I should know a little bit about how to take people through the steps. And I've been taking people through the steps since I was 3 months sober. I don't know how good a job I did, but I had a sponsor and my sponsor had a sponsor, and my sponsor knew he was my sponsor, which is another important fact that you need to know, that your sponsor knows who you are. But the thing is like, I'm not alone in this thing. We do this shoulder to shoulder because the first step in recovery starts out when I walk in the door of Alcoholics Anonymous by being alone. And immediately if I get welcomed at that meeting and I have sponsees that's their job, welcome every newcomer there. You approach them. Don't wait for them to approach you. And then when they do that there, then I can recover too, because then all of a sudden I became a we. First step, first word in the first step. That's all I got, Kathy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. And absolutely, I've had those thoughts too. Do I really have the physical allergy? And I'm reminded, yeah, Kathy,
Mm.
come on, get with it. That's the mental obsession telling me that. It doesn't come screaming like a red flag. It's a mental obsession. And what comes before that's because my spiritual malady, my spiritual condition, and that self-pity you talked about, like I am a self-pityer. I'm just saying that, like, I'm not a self-righteousness, I'm a self-pity. And self-pity is that warm blanket I want, and I don't want you to pull it off me
Mm.
until it's smothering me. And usually the end result, like David talked about, is a drink. Like I don't know any other solution left to my own devices, and without a power in my life, and without these 12 steps. And this first line here, were three exceptional men lost to this world because I did not understand alcoholism as I do now. What an irony, I became an alcoholic myself. And like out of my experience before, the end of my drinking and using, um, for oblivion, when it was working and it was functioning and I thought I was functioning. But when you do inventory, that changes of how selfish you are in the workplace. Um, but I had a boss who drank every day, and he drank in front of us, and he was very violent and
Mm.
scary. But it was so easy for me to see that he was an alcoholic. I could not see that I was an alcoholic,
Mm.
right? And what an irony, and we'll talk about, if we get to it later, a little bit about the cycle, but also how we have these three examples all because of this lack of understanding of this illness. It's not about being weak. And I don't know how many times I thought it was that I changed my mind in the day and that I was weak and I pick up a drink that night. Like I thought it was a moral thing, right? And it's this lack of understanding of the alcoholic illness with and amongst employers, business folks, but also this lack of understanding too is, what is alcoholism? What do I suffer from in the rooms of AA? Right? We come in, and I often did not know until I did know. I didn't even understand my illness. I thought it was
Mm.
just put the plug in the jug, right? But why was I still walking around wanting to die? Because I didn't have a solution. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's all I got for that. And it says nearly every modern employer feels a moral responsibility for the well-being of his health, and he tries to meet these responsibilities. That he has not always done so for the alcoholic is easily understood. To him, the alcoholic has often seemed a fool of the first magnitude because of the employee's special ability or of his own strong personal attachment to him. The employer has sometimes kept such a man at work long beyond a reasonable period. Some employers have tried every known remedy. In only a few instances has there been a lack of patience and tolerance, and we who have imposed on the best of employers can scarcely blame them if they have been short with us. Over to you,
Mm.
David.
Thank you. Yeah. So this is about someone who really doesn't understand. And if I'm a sponsor and I really don't understand, then I probably should find someone who's a big book sponsor. And I bring that up a lot of times in meetings, and I've had people come up to me and go, "What is a big book sponsor?" And I thought it was rather evident that someone who understands the big book. But I had a guy actually approach me last Sunday. I go to a couple live meetings and I do a few Zoom meetings. But the live meetings I go to, I'm sometimes some people leave, and because I thumped this book a little bit, and that's just how it is. Too bad. This is not a feeling program. This is a life saving program. And the guy came up to me and says, "I don't think that I'm powerless anymore. I've been sober for a really long time." And I had to point out to him, dude, if you were to pick up a drink today, could you manage the amount that you picked up? And he said, "Well, no, of course not." I said, "Well, then you have no control." And then I said, and then could you stop on your own power before you got here? Was there something that convinced you that you should stop on your own power? And if he would have said, "Yeah, well, I stopped for my wife," I go, "Well, then you're a hard drinker. You're not an alcoholic and you don't really need to be here." But I go, I would also take him to first paragraph of page 44, and I would do a really thorough job with that with him just to make sure, because I don't want to make somebody leave. But it says that, so you have no choice. whether or not you pick up a drink. So I have no power, no choice, no control. That all comes from like, and recently I've been listening to Mark Houston and Joe Hawk again. I went back. They do all 12 steps in Prescott, Arizona, at a treatment center. It's one of the best 12 steps uh, done at a treatment center or talks I've ever heard. I love it, and I haven't heard it in a while. And so I've been listening to it every morning on my hour drive to my first customer, and I just love it. I just love how I need to always go back to the first step. Everything needs to be back to the first step. I have to understand, like, so I get on my knees every morning and invite God in. No matter what, I've never missed a day in all the 24 hours I've been here. And again at night, I thank Him. But the bottom line is because I am without power. I'm without choice. I'm without control. But I am responsible for the action here. So I am armed with the facts of myself. I am very comfortable about taking people to this work, and I don't mind explaining to them and giving them definitions because I didn't have that kind of stuff. I went to a big book study that was a really thorough one when I was 2 years sober, and I brought a lot of my sponsees with me, and we learned about the big book, and then we took on responsibilities of being a big book study. Now, I didn't do a very good job, probably. I took someone else's words, and then now I have thousands of people's words, and I steal all your words, not just one individual. Now, none of these are my original ideas. None of this stuff in the big book is either from Howard or Kathy or Joe Hawk or Mark Houston or Katie and Charlie Parker or the Ramers or you. I mean, someone here. That's just how it goes, And what I do when I listen to a tape, I timestamp it. If there's something that really stands out to me, and I write a note right away in the truck, and then when I go home at night, I get out my big book, and then I write what was said or stated at that time. One of the things that Mark Houston says: take all statements in the big book and turn them into questions, personalize them. And it's like that made so much sense to me when I heard it. But could I have possibly came up with that on my own? Not a chance. I'm the easier, softer way kind of guy. Nah, that sounds like a lot of work. I'm not doing that. But when I started doing that, and then I started presenting that to my sponsees, I got a guy who's 5 years sober who just asked me to take him to the work. We do it on Monday night for 2 hours. I take him to this work, and he's going to start his 4-step. We did our 3rd-step prayer on our knees because there was nowhere else to do it but right outside the doors of the meeting on Monday night. And everybody's going, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Get on your knees. We're going to do the 3rd-step prayer, everybody. Everybody come on in or leave, one of the two." It's like, we're going to get with God here. And the wonderful thing about this is like, I am not ashamed. I am so grateful that I have a God in my life today. That I'm not afraid to get on my knees and bring something in my life, be a demonstration in other people's life and how this works. I know the truth about this thing, that this is a killer disease, period, the end. But even more so than that, if you accept the solution and you do this work diligently with the desperation of a drowning man, the results are that you will get recovered. That is the gift. That is the spiritual experience. If I could have created my own spiritual experience, wouldn't I have done that on my own? Yeah, I would have, but I couldn't. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thanks, David. Absolutely. And step one, like just to bounce off what you're saying, step one today, I know in my heart is an absolute gift, but it's not enough in itself to keep me here. Step one gave me the sense of urgency that David talked about, that he's moving into his sponsor, he's moving into his 4th step. We're doing it on the steps of the meeting, before the meeting. It's like, we don't have time to, I'm not going to use that word, mess about here. Like, my time is running out when I get here. I get problems when I get sober if I don't have a sufficient substitute. And so that is a gift. People talk about this gift of desperation. For me, is used to work the rest of the steps to apply the solution with the desperation of a drowning man. And like, if I do that with a recovered alcoholic, a recovered member, it's like monkey see, monkey do. Like, I'm gonna get the results. But if I DICK around, I have 4 years of that, and I got nothing, not even half. It talks about half reveals us nothing. I thought, well, would I get half? Nothing. So I must be all in, but none of this is original. My sponsor met me before this, actually, sorry, to help me get, some notes on this. And this is not original. This is from David's and Howard's and my sponsor. And like, I don't like to do any hard work inventory. I have a sponsor that helps me fill in the blanks in column 4. So I'm all for the spoon feeling, hand holding. So, but this paragraph, we see that the employers, like the chapter starts heavily, um, really appealing to emotion. It's appealing to our emotions about um sorry, and what we're going to see now is like what we're about to read is this appeal to logic. So it's appealing to us emotionally and it's appealing to us in our logic for this is Bill trying to sell to employers or business folk, if you want to call them that, and why alcoholics should be offered this opportunity to recover. And it's also like it's a book meeting us where we're at. And what do I mean by that? It's to say, like, we know, where's that line that I read? To him, the alcoholic has often seemed a fool of first magnitude. Like, if we don't know it, we'll find out. Like, in
Hmm.
other words, what do I know? What do I mean is like when we get here, we will have some resistance to think that, is it possible that I'm the problem? You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, I get to find that out. The book tells me what my problem is. And it's, as Howard would always say, it's on the birth certificate. And we know that, in the book's telling us that, and it's meeting the employer where they're at, and it's meeting us, the alcoholic, we're at, because we're probably resistant, so I love this book because it just meets us where we're at. Okay, so here, for instance, is a typical example. An officer of one of the largest banking institutions in America knows I no longer drink. One day he told me about an executive of the same bank who, from his description, was undoubtedly alcoholic. So, from what I have known and gathered from Howard and the people that have went before me, that I've been monkey see, monkey do, and managed to write this down. I was not lazy. This is Clarence Snyder we're talking about here. Why am I sharing? I'm not supposed to share first. Sorry, David.
No, you can do anything you want, Kathy. There's no
I'm
rules
like
here.
rooting myself here. Let me finish and I'll let you share, and then I'll do it like
No.
this seemed to me like an opportunity to be helpful. So I spent 2 hours talking about alcoholism, the malady, and described the symptoms and results as well as I could. His comment was very interesting, but I'm sure this man is done drinking. He has just returned from a 3 months leave of absence, has taken a cure, looks fine, and to clinch the matter, the board of directors told him this was his last chance. Over to you.
If you want to go ahead. There's no set
No.
order here. Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you. So, typical example is sometimes referred to as I think I'm different. So I am not always I am not different. I got to look for similarities, not differences. So then it says an officer of the largest banking institution in America knows I no longer drink. So I got to share one little brief story. I was listening to Alice the other day. You guys all know Alice. She's a really good speaker and I love her. So she was talking about one of her girlfriends said to her, she says, she goes, I want to go out to dinner with you. I love that you don't drink. And now the girlfriend is not a drunk or an alcoholic, right? Not recovering, nothing like that. She goes, it's just so cool that you don't drink. I love going out with you. It's so much fun. And Alice all of a sudden thought to herself, after 30 some years of sobriety, she goes, you know what? You're right. I don't drink. I am a lot of fun. It's like, think about that. Pinch yourself, guys. Only by the grace of God. If you got one day, pinch yourself. But that's so true. Like, we're not a glum lot. Like, I've actually have a personality today that people want to be around me. How does that take place? I'm not causing a lot of damage in my life any longer, right? So I love that, and I had to share that because I love listening to Alice and everybody. There's so many great speakers. Go find a Zoom meeting. Go find his favorite speakers, and just to attach to them. So back to page 138 in the first paragraph, this halfway through, he says, one day he told me about an executive of a bank who, from his description, was undoubtedly an alcoholic. So he has three folds of the illness. This seemed to be, and it is three folds. This seemed to be like an opportunity to be helpful. So I spent how long? 2 hours. Yes, 2 hours, guys, not 2 minutes. Call me up on the phone. We'll get together next week. Dude, window of opportunity, right, Howard? It's slamming shut. when that guy called me after 23 years absence in my life, I said, dude, when you get out, and I know the date, it's February 7th, and he's going to a halfway house. I said, you got to give me at least 2 hours with you. The first hour I'm going to spend with him is I want to know what happened, and I want to know what he's been up to. I'm going to give him all that time. And then when we get done with that part, because I want to get to know him a little bit better, because it's been a long, long time, then I'm going to spend 15 minutes with him to tell me what he expects to get out of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I'm going to start on the steps right away. And he's got to get, and then he gets to be quiet for 45 minutes, and I get to go through the first 3 steps with him if we get that far. There no mandates on how far I get. So however God directs me. But back to the text. This seemed to be like an opportunity to be helpful. So I spent 2 hours talking about alcoholism. Then it's a comma, then the malady, right? So we're talking about the craving, the obsession, and the malady. The greater part of the illness is the malady. And when we straighten out spiritually, we straighten out physically and mentally, right? And it says, so we're going to introduce them to the bedevilments. And I love introducing a treatment center people to the bedevilments. I love it because first of all, they've got a couple 24, maybe they got like 2 weeks sober, right? So they don't think they really have a drink problem anymore. They're just trying to figure out how to poke the girl in the other next room next to them, right? That's what they're thinking about. I know this. And it's not from my experience either. I'm just saying, not my personal experience when I've worked with others through treatment centers. But the thing is, when I bring the malady up, when I talk about the irritable, restless, and discontentness, when I talk about the bedevilments having problems with personal relationship, I ask them to consider this. Consider, are you having problems with personal relationship? Usually the hands go up right away. But are you prey to misery and depression? Like, think about that. Are you full of fear? And I'm not on page 52, so I'm just paraphrasing. Are you full of fear? We give an example of fear, how it shows up coming and going, and how we're full of it. Are you feeling useful? Can you be a real help to other people? And asking people to consider this. Don't answer the question right away because this is not, we're not in the classroom. This is a life or death situation. You need to soak this in to see if this is really you, if this is what you suffer from. Because when the bedevilments come back, and they will show up in your life when you're having problems with personal relationships, you need to be in the 10th step. I need to be in the 10th step right then. And I better started my morning out with in the 11th step. I better have done that. So anyways, back to the text then, it says his comment was very interesting. Oh, wait, I missed something. The malady and describe the symptoms. The symptoms are the bedevilments, right? These symptoms that we're talking about, they're not the bedevilments. These are the symptoms of me having a malady. And that's the description on page 52 in the second paragraph in the second sentence. It's beautiful. If you're living it, not so beautiful. His comment was very interesting, but I'm sure this man is done drinking. Are you done good and for all? That's a good question. And I don't think that they can answer that question honestly. I don't see how you could possibly answer that question honestly. Of course, in the moment, because your external world looks like hell. But this is an internal illness with an internal solution. And they don't know this yet. And this is my job as a sponsor to take them through that so they understand this is an internal illness with an internal solution. When my insides start to get better, then my outsides get better. And that's just how this works in that order. It doesn't work any other way. I'm not saying at first my external world doesn't get a little bit better. It surely does. I show up at work. I start getting a paycheck. I make the border crossing with mama. That's a reference from Babe. Just give him credit where credit's due, guys. I'm just saying. I told you I'm a thief. I steal from everybody. And and the thing is, my external world starts getting better, but my insides are still full of bedevilments. How do I get rid of them? It says on page 27 what happens, right? When Roland Hazard, it talks about what Carl Jung describes to us, what has to be done. So back to the text, his comment was very interesting, but I'm sure this man is done drinking. He has just returned from 3-month leave of absence, has taken the cure, looks fine, right? Our outsides are looking good. And to clinch the matter, the board of directors told him that this was his last chance. Okay, take that. When I went to court so many times, and the judge says, next time you show up in court, and I got this from Earl Hightower. And it's my experience, though, because I used to think this way. I got it from Earl Hightower. I remember many 24 hours ago, I used to first listen to Earl Hightower because I loved how fascinating, how funny he was. And he says, the judge says, if you show up in my court one more time, I'm locking you up and giving the full sentence of the crime that you committed. And I thought to myself, and he did too, because I laugh like hell. I know I'm going, so I'm making plans. I know I'm going. I'm always in court. I'm in court so many freaking times, it's ridiculous. I've been in every jail within about 30-mile radius of where I grew up at. And I started when I was 14 until I got sober when I was 38. It's just ridiculous. I have felonies and misdemeanors and all this kind of stuff in my background, right? But I'm making plans because I'm my own power. I have no choice, no power, no choice, no control, and I cannot uh, enlist my own spiritual experience. That's what the steps are designed to do. That's all I got, Kathy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I know we're almost out of time and I'll just you went into spiritual malady. I was like, yay. And the symptoms also is this physical allergy. And as we know, when we put the allergen on top of the allergy, we set off this phenomenon of craving. And for me, I didn't understand that because I was like, what do you mean? Like an abnormal reaction to alcohol? Ah. I just drink a lot. Like, yeah, that's the abnormal reaction. Like my sister finishes a glass, doesn't finish the glass of wine, puts it over there and throws it out. She doesn't do what I do. Like, and that's just I don't understand them. I think they're the crazy people. Like, I thought everyone drank like this until I came here and learned about this illness. And then I have this mental so the craving is the symptom. And then once I start, I can't stop. But more baffling than that is this mental obsession. I can't stop myself from starting, right? And yeah, the bedevilments of going you went through them, but I loved when you talked about how it says, but I'm sure this man is done drinking. Like I was always done until the
Mhm,
next time, right? And I meant it. I meant it with all my heart. But I get so restless, irritable, and discontented on my own power, and I'm living in those bedevilments that I don't have a sufficient substitute, only alcohol. That's all I got. That's all I got. And I'll finish on this. You know, it talks about here, he has returned from a 3 month leave of absence. He's taken a cure. He looks fine. So perhaps he's been to rehab. That's his cure. You know what I
mhm.
mean? And to clinch the matter, the board of directors told him this was his last chance. So what we see here at the end of this paragraph is that with this the bank guy, what he offered him was human power, right? This frothy emotional appeal, and
Mm.
it didn't work. Human power, my own power will not work, you know? And that's all I have. And I think we're
We're at top of the hour. Thank you, Kathy, so much. It's so fun. Love doing this with you more than anything. It's just a blast. You're so good at it, and you're so fun. So thank you so much for being a good friend.
thank you.
Um, we can open it up for any questions. And anybody got any questions or any comments? And I think Rob's in charge of all that stuff. So if you don't mind, Rob, please, because I don't know how to do it.
Oh, can I just put in, sorry,
Oh,
I
of course.
got informed by the history husband that this was not Clarence Snyder. My
Oh,
bad,
oh,
not Clarence.
okay. I'm going to erase it then. I didn't have that.
Bravo.
It's
Your
okay.
history
It's all
husband.
good. Thank you. Thank you, Howard. Anyone?
Hi, June alcoholic.
Hi, June.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, good. Hey, Kathy. Great job. Good to see you. Hi, Howard. I too didn't know. I didn't have a solution, and I thought it was a moral dilemma as well, a weakness, and um, I didn't know I had a disease or a spiritual malady, and I got so bad. My malady was so bad that I had a mental breakdown. And because it was lack of knowledge. When I got into AA, I learned what the solution was. And I didn't even know I had a disease until I came to AA. And I'm just so grateful. And I started out with Howard. He was my first big book study, and always have a soft spot for him, and then
Hmm.
guys and Steve and stuff. But yeah, big book study really opened my eyes to how this program is, and that knowledge is power, right? That's why I love the big book. It's our program, and I love diving into it. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, June. Anyone else? Anyone else? Rob? No? Okay. All right, guys. Well, we close this meeting with the 11 step prayer, which is in the 12 and 12. is St. Francis's prayer. It's on page 99, and Rob is always the best of the best of the best, and he will have that posted in the chat. So if you'd like to follow along. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather than comfort to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. But it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen. God bless you guys. Kathy again and Rob, thank you guys so much.
That was
This
so
is-
much fun. Thank you all.
Thank
for
So much
you.
fun. You're the best. Thank you guys. Love
Yeah.
you guys so much.
Thank you, Kathy.
God
That was
bless
awesome.
everybody.
All right. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
See y'all
Thank
next
you,
week.
David G. That was
Night,
Thank you.
awesome.
David. Night,
Good night,
Kathy.
y'all.
Howard.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank-
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Rob.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night, guys.
Night, Bert.
Night.
Thank you, Rob.
Howard, who is it that they're talking about? It's not Clarence Snyder. We talked about this before, but we never got into the fact who it was.
No,
It's Frank Winans is the banker.
I haven't gotten any definitive answers on that.
Okay,
David
fair enough.
Confirmed anything, or has Jim Worley, and those are the two guys I go to.
Okay, yeah, I would go to that. Jim Worley too, yeah.
Rob,
fair
who was the banker?
Frank Winans.
Thank you.
He's the one
Got
that Bill had to deal with that went south. He signed the deal.
Mhm.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys. Thank you
Night.
again. Thanks, Kathy. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
David.